get started. Would you be able to share your screen, Olivia? Awesome. Amazing. Okay. So as you can see behind me, this is the Stanford's Art Museums. We have the Cantor Art Center and the Anderson Collection on our beautiful campus here. And this workshop is to introduce everyone to the student opportunities that are available on campus at the museums. So I'll go to the next slide. Wonderful. So this is just an introduction of who we are. I can start off. My name is Mackenzie Lynch, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the academic programs coordinator at the Cantor Art Center. I was also a Stanford student myself. I graduated in 2018, and I was an art history major. So that's a little bit about me. And I help out with the student guides and other student programs we have at the museum, including Cantor Scholars. And I'm going to pass it to Kaylee, who was both a student guide and Cantor Scholar.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kaylee Noak. I'm a current senior studying art practice. And like Mackenzie said, I'm a student guide. I've been a student guide since 2019. Yeah, 2019. And then I participated in Cantor Scholars the summer of 2020. And I use she, her pronouns.
Hi, my name is Olivia Morello. I am a senior studying international relations. So I want to say to all of you who are interested in art, but maybe are not thinking of majoring in it, it's totally still possible and even exciting to get involved, even without that kind of minor background. And I am a museum student guide, same class as Kaylee.
Wonderful. I'll take the microphone from you. And I'll transition to the next slide as well. Alrighty, so I am just going to give a brief overview of all the student opportunities, and I can go into more detail during the Q&A at the end of the session too, or you can ask me questions now as well in the chat or in person. So the first one that I'll mention is student guides. So these applications have just opened up and they are due on March 11th. And as a student guide, you can be an undergraduate or a graduate student. We take people with a broad range of interests and backgrounds. So like Olivia said, don't worry if you're not an art history major or an art practice major. We love the diversity of the student population and interests, and that's an asset that you can bring to the museum. And yeah, basically, when you're a student guide, you take a year-long class where you get paid to go to class, which is really a good bonus, especially in the arts. And then the following year, you get to give the tours that you practiced during your year-long training to the general public, but also to the K-12 audiences that we have come on school field trips and other opportunities to work at the museums. And these are guides at both the Cantor Art Center and the Anderson Collection. So you'll get to become familiar with both museums in your training. And yeah, so you can go to our jobs and internship page on the Cantor Art Center website. I'll link that in the chat after everything. But that's a very exciting opportunity. Next, I'll tell you a little bit about museum nights. So museum nights are quarterly events for Stanford students to engage with the museums through student performances, art making, and social activities. These are very fun opportunities that now we're in person again, we can resume. We always have free food and all the galleries are open, and we have tours by our awesome student guides to help you explore the museum and make the space your own. And then next, I'll talk a little bit about Art Breaks, which is a virtual offering we started during the pandemic, where student guides give virtual little teaser tours of different objects in the collection that they especially identify with from their interdisciplinary backgrounds. And you can RSVP. We actually had one this Wednesday, but they happen monthly on the second Wednesday of the month. And next, I'll talk a little bit about partnerships. So if you are a student or you're in a student group that wants to get involved with a special project at the museums, feel free. You can just reach out to me or just apply to one of these programs if you're interested. And we'd love to work with students whether it's a workshop or a special project, or if you want to perform at a museum night. Those are all welcome. And then last but not least, we have amazing exhibitions. So there's always different things on view at the museums that you can see. And we have the Cantor internships. These are new this year, where you can go behind the scenes and get experience working at the museums. And these applications are open also until March 11th. Wonderful. So now I'll pass it to Kaylee.
Hi, everybody. Oh my goodness. So many things. All right. So to get us started and to get a little taste of what it might be like to be on a tour or to be guiding a tour, we're going to be doing a short activity in close looking. So with close looking, we really want to focus on just your observations of the pieces, what resonates with you, and having an open conversation about the works and our feelings. So we're going to start off with an object from the Cantor, and we're going to virtually enter into this space. The piece we're going to be looking at today is from our exhibition, Medium is the Message. This is a virtual tour that's also available online for everyone to check out, but we're going to be using this today just to get a sense of what it might be like to be walking around the museum in person. So I'm going to give everyone just a little bit of time to look at this work, think about the things that you see and what kinds of things pop up for you. Oh, yes.
Or if Claudia, if you guys see any comments in the chat, feel free to shout them out too.
Whoops. Represent the chat.
Shout it out.
Yeah, so let's start with just a real simple question. What do you see? Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit about installation, right? So it's hanging and there are these shadows. What do the shadows add for you? Why do you think the shadows are important, or why specifically is this corner section important to you? Mm. Yeah, that's really cool. I like that you mentioned this idea of movement, even though the image is still, you can sort of still feel how the sculpture has some sort of like fluidity to it. And even though we're virtual, if you saw this piece in person, it actually spins a little bit because it's suspended. So we can guess that that would also add another element to that. Does anyone else see anything else? Or maybe we might want to touch on a little bit about fluidity or shadow or even space. Yeah.
Kaylee, really quickly, I think we're going to pass the microphones to the
Oh,
Okay, I was just gonna say it's interesting playing with materiality and immateriality because you have the material object itself and then you have the shadow that it casts. And in that same sense, like depth and surface, and then also flatness, and then the sculptural nature of the piece. So yeah.
so that's really cool. So you mentioned material, right? And this piece is in the medium is the message. It's kind of hard to tell virtually, but could you guess what the material is? Okay, so you said wire. What is your name again? Isabel. So Isabel made the observation that this is made out of wire, which is completely correct. And you mentioned that it was woven. So how do we feel about this combination of both something that is woven and this hard materiality of wire? Okay, Isabel says that it speaks to fluidity, which I would completely agree with. For me, that kind of adds the sort of like juxtaposition. Like you said, it's very fluid, but it's also very strong and structural. And I think the idea of wire being this hard material sort of counteracts with this feeling of motion that we get with the piece. Okay. So these are all really great things. We talked a little bit about installation, about the way that light interacts with the piece, about space, about material, and then about an emerging theme of juxtaposition and two things that are counteracting with each other. So thinking about all of these elements of art, which artists think of when they're creating these pieces, I'm gonna give the mic to Olivia, who's gonna focus on a different object and think about everything that we talked about here as we look at this next piece.
Sorry, forgive me. I have to pull up the images. Great. So this image that we're going to be looking at next is at the Anderson Museum. And we unfortunately don't have a nice virtual installation. So we're going to be working with PowerPoint slides, but I still think we could talk a lot about this piece. So like Kaylee did with her piece, I'm just going to give you all a minute to look at it and observe. See what jumps out at you, what it makes you feel, just kind of ruminate on that. Okay, to give you all just a quick sense of scale, since we can't see this piece in person, I wanted to show using this kind of dorky 6-foot tall person how big the piece would be if you saw it in the museum. And it's currently on view in the museum, both of these pieces are, so if you get a chance, you should definitely check them out. We'll get back to the piece. Okay, I want to open it up to observations. What do you all see here?
There's a lot of expressive brushwork that creates kind of a sense of motion in painting. Especially the bottom left corner, you can see those kind of gray marks, I think. And yeah, it seemed like very brushy. And then you also have kind of like splattering effects on the like lower right-hand side.
Great. I think that's a really, really great observation about kind of maybe the movement or the energy of the piece you're getting from brushstrokes. Does anyone have any other observations they'd like to add or maybe build upon Isabel's observation? Either way. It can be about color, shapes, lines. I know it's a very abstract piece.
It definitely when it first showed up, I was struck by like there's so much depth sort of I think in the way that it plays with the light and specifically the shading in relation to the lines, like with the line sort of about a third of the way up and then the diagonal line, it creates such a strong shape. And then sort of the darkness in the corner is it directs your, and then like the white below the first line, it sort of directs your eye in an upward motion. And then it becomes more of a play with light and dark of the paint itself. But it's really interesting just how your eye entirely follows that line. And even though obviously it's flat, like even the curve at the very top, and there's just all these different shapes and moments of high contrast between light and very dark that sort of create like a swirling where you don't exactly know what's layered where or where exactly on what plane you're looking at, which I think is really, really cool.
I think that this piece provides a lot of contrast for me. There's like kind of the chaoticness and more like different like shades, like kind of grayscale and the like in all the corners besides the downwards right corner. And then I feel like there's this like very sharp like diagonal line across kind of the middle. And the bottom left corner is like a lot more like organized and feels a lot more calculated. So I just feel like it just seems like a lot of differences like kind of coalesced side by side for me. And like part of me like wants to like mesh them together and like resolve it.
These are really great observations that you all are making, especially about, juxtaposition between maybe some of the more sharp or the more like line elements and the more organic between light and dark. And that was a theme that this artist, Jay DeFeo, is very interested in. So for example, she actually was really interested in Florentine architecture and architecture from the Renaissance. A specific quote that she said in an interview was that she liked to integrate the quote spontaneous feeling for abstract expressionism with something of the refinement of the Renaissance period. So I think some of your observations about, maybe these more linear elements with more chaotic elements kind of hits on that point there. I think it's also cool to talk about the title of this painting because it's such an abstract piece. It's hard to know what this would be called. But the artist Jay DeFeo actually named this painting Summer Image for My Mother. And she painted it in 1983, the same year that her mother passed away. So I wanted to ask you all if that happens to change how you interpret the painting at all, or if it reaffirms something that you saw in the beginning.
I think the idea of summer image when first reading that, it definitely seems sort of contrary to all the warm, like the cool tones and the black and that feeling of it. Your eye goes into sort of the denser, darker part of the painting, but then learning that it is in remembrance of someone who has passed. It sort of seems it adds a very significant layer to the idea of a summer image, and also it brings out that idea of sort of passing and of the feeling where even though there is a lot of white and it is bright and there's still some color and there's a lot of texture and dynamicism, it still is directing your eye, and like the fact of something has happened, something is going somewhere, and where it's going is a little murky. And I think that it reflects the title remarkably well.
Yeah, my comment's much shorter, but I was just going to say that knowing this information, I'm much more inclined to interpret the darker color palette as something somber, especially given the passing of their mother.
Yeah, and I know when I first saw this piece too, after I saw the title, I thought maybe this part here looked kind of like a side profile of a face. I started seeing more like human elements to it, but definitely just open to interpretation. And I thought it would also be really interesting to contrast this painting by Jay DeFeo with her most famous work, which she made earlier in her career called The Rose. So you can see here, these are some of the statistics about the rose. It is much, much bigger than Summer Image. We have here kind of a contrast. And I wanted to open it up to you all about maybe some similarities or differences you notice between Summer Image and her other piece, The Rose. When it comes to color, how similar or different do you think the two pieces are? There's no right or wrong answer, don't worry.
Um, Even though I think the rose is probably kind of monochromatic, it feels like there's a light center and a dark like surrounding area, and I feel like both of them have this so even though they look very different in style, they could have been done at completely different time periods. In my opinion, they look very different. They still have that kind of bright and forward center, and then there's a dark kind of frame. Yeah.
Yeah, those are great points. As kind of represented by the rose, Jay DeFeo's work prior to Summer Image was very monochromatic. It looked at, she basically used white, blacks, and grays. But I like what you said about the light sourcing and how she kind of plays with that and how it draws the eye and focus, because I really do see those similarities between both pieces there. I also think in terms of shape and size, there's a lot of interesting differences. I unfortunately could not find a photo of some of the rose looking at its side, but the rose is actually layers upon layers of oil paint. And if it is actually 11 inches deep, so it looks almost like a 3D sculpture. And I think it's an interesting contrast with that and the Summer Image, because the Summer Image piece is very flat. And Jay DeFeo herself mentioned that at the time she was making the Summer Image series, she was actually looking at a lot of Japanese prints, and that might have inspired her actual spatial considerations with this painting. So with that, I do want to just end with one last quote that I find kind of interesting from her, since we touched on the more personal element, the personal meaning of this painting for the artist. I thought it was also interesting that she has this quote about the meaning of her art. Quote, "My painting is somewhat like archetypal images, common denominators to everybody's experience, but people can translate them in their own terms. What I'm aiming at is not so much the specific, but something that transcends into a universal language that is meaningful to all people." And I think that is a really great message that, we can take something out of art, even if we don't know everything about the artist, even if we don't know everything about their life history or backstory, we can get something by just looking and observing. So thank you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mackenzie.
Thank you, Olivia and Kaylee, for wonderful mini tours. And now we're going to transition to an art making activity to get you guys hands-on with the artwork. And also for people on Zoom, we have something you can do on your computers with just a pencil and paper at home too. So I'm going to pass it back over.
Sounds good. Yeah, so we are doing an art making activity that's kind of modeled on what some Cantor scholars do, which I think will be touched on a little bit later in this meeting or during Q&A. We ask that you all just pick one of the pieces that we discussed today, and using either model magic or paper, which we will be passing out, or those of you on Zoom just using paper and pencil, make a response to one of these pieces. And that's very broad. It's not telling you to make a replica. It's, think about one of the themes we touched on or something that really caught your attention during the presentation and create a response to it using the materials offered. We're going to give you all like 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll have 5 minutes for you all to discuss among yourselves how you found this exercise and your inspiration. And we ask that you all on Zoom, you can just put in the chat how this activity went for you all. So with that, I guess, Mackenzie, you'll be passing out the supplies.
I'll pass out the supplies and I'll put the microphone back, but stick around too for after the art activity. We'll be opening it up for Q&A where we can dive deeper into our different programs we offer, questions about the applications, and so forth. So without further ado, I'll pass out the supplies.
Whatever's gonna inspire you in the moment. Oh. Victoria for the thinker. I think I'm gonna, I don't know. Do you want some bread? Oh. I mean, that kind of not to take away from the rose there. Okay, I think I know what I'm doing now. What do you do? It's not salt, so it's salt time. Do I want Oh, maybe I will. my vision. That's so cute.
Okay, so it's been 10 minutes. Definitely don't want to stop you all from working on whatever you feel like, but if you all want to like share what you've done with the person next to you, or if you're on Zoom, put it in the chat. Please feel free.
Wait, yeah, can we talk to the people on Zoom? Can I stand in front of the camera?
Hi, everyone on Zoom. If you'd like to turn on your videos and show us what you made, you are welcome to. No pressure though. Or put in the chat anything about the experience. You're welcome to speak aloud too. We'll be able to hear you through Olivia's computer. This is our first time doing a hybrid virtual in-person event. Very exciting.
Would I just take it? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Olivia wants me to share my art.
Oh, good idea. Yeah, go close to the camera.
This is so. Hello. Is it? Oh. Yes, please. Thank you. Um, just to start a little conversation. So I was inspired by both materiality and the conceptual things that we talked about with the J DeFeo. So when we got the little model magic, I liked how the two colors blended together. So I played with that materiality. And then thinking about like J DeFeo and abstract expressionism and also like very strong emotions, I was like, wow, this is how it feels when two things collide with each other. Would anyone else like to share their art? Thank you.
Too. Maybe you guys already talked amongst yourselves,
Yeah.
but we can wander around and look after the workshop, but we can also transition into, we're going to transition into Q&A. Any questions about, yes. Yes, happy to answer.
Yeah, I was wondering if there's like quarter long internships or internships that happen during the school year, and I guess who's who can apply, how all of that works.
Happy to talk about all those details. So we have 4 available summer internships. They would last the whole quarter of the summer, and they are with different departments. Got my exact notes. So we have an internship with the academic engagement intern, which will work with the academic programs department. We also have a community and family engagement intern who will help out with family programs. Then we also have a photography and new media curatorial intern. So that'll work specifically with the photography and new media curator at the museum. And then we also have an American art curatorial intern who will work with the American art curator. Any other further follow-up questions on those? But it would be about 10 weeks during the summer, and it should be a really fun experience getting to be behind the scenes in the museum. We might do lunches together, and we'll probably do maybe a field trip or 2 to different places in the Bay Area. And yeah, it'll be a great experience, exposure to the museum. Yes.
Are there any internships at the Anderson collection?
Yes. So those are not posted yet, but they'll be posted in the spring. And those are intended specifically also for BIPOC students as well. And we currently have some Anderson interns that are working right now during the school year. So that program might continue on into the school year. But those applications will open up spring quarter. Yeah, any other questions? And you can also go to our jobs and internship pages on both websites too, if you want to see all the details as well. I'll put the link in the chat for the Zoom people too. See if the microphone will reach. Here you go.
Thank you. I was wondering what your favorite part of being a tour guide is and what you're looking for in like potential tour guides.
Great question. I'll pass this to Olivia and Kaylee. Your favorite parts about being tour guides?
Okay, so I'll start. I think probably my favorite thing about being a tour guide is really like talking to just random people who come in the museum and know absolutely nothing about art, and kind of like leading them through a pretty similar process to what we did today, encouraging them to observe a piece and then offering more information, building upon kind of what they observe. I find it to be really valuable because it encourages kind of like a collaboration between groups. So at the end, I almost feel like I know everyone pretty well and they know me pretty well. And I've had a really great time with that. I also find it rewarding because I feel like in that kind of style of tour guiding, the people in the group leave feeling like they actually will retain some of the information that we've discussed. And they also will feel hopefully more confident looking at pieces in the future, knowing that what they're observing is actually, valid and helpful. So yeah, that's probably my favorite part about being a tour guide. As for the second part of your question, if I remember correctly, it's what do we look for in tour guides? And from my side of things, I think the program is really, really broad. They, as I mentioned at the beginning, they take people from every kind of background. So as an international relations major, I still ended up as a tour guide. You only have to demonstrate interest. I think as well, showing that, maybe you have good public speaking skills or that's something that you're looking to work on, that you're willing to commit to the time frame. You spend like an entire year training before you actually start giving tours, and that you're also willing to do some independent research on the art pieces because all of the tour guides create their own tours. So we're not memorizing from a script. We are doing our own research and then putting it together. That would be what I highlight.
Yeah, so the tours that we did today were super short, especially mine. But one of the things I love most about being a tour guide, I love to talk. So very similar to Olivia, I just enjoy having conversations with people And because so many different people are visiting the museums, like you always get to learn something new about a piece from the perspective of somebody else. And I'd also want to second the fact that it's really fun to have a cohort that comes from like different backgrounds. So don't let like any perceived lack of knowledge of art stop you from being a tour guide, because I think honestly a lot of the most interesting tours I've been on have been from like people like Olivia or people who are not at all even an art major. And then something that I wanted to add to that was that I really love being able to spend a lot of time with the pieces that we have. We're really lucky to get artworks from a bunch of different artists, especially in the Anderson. Um, the current exhibition we have is really cool. And in the Cantor, we have the library up right now too, which is a great piece of work. And the best thing about being a tour guide is being able to sit and spend time with these works and think about them. And in my case, respond to some of the works through Cantor Scholars. So I really just appreciate that connection that we get to have with artists and with art that I feel like I wouldn't have had without being a tour guide.
Thank you so much. And Keely, you mentioned two Cantor Scholars. So I just wanted to mention that program as well. I didn't have it on the slides because it's going on hiatus next year, but it will be back. So Kaylee has done an incredible Cantor Scholars project that she actually brought with her. And so I was wondering if you want to share it at all. But with the Cantor Scholars program, which you can apply for the following year, students get to do independent research on any object in the Cantor's collection. And your response can be a creative art project, or it can be a research paper, an exhibition plan. The sky's the limit for how you respond to these things. You just submit like a one-page proposal for the application and a letter of recommendation. And we usually take about 4 or so Cantor Scholars each year. And yeah, want to talk more about it?
Oh, I just said it's also funded, which was nice. But yeah, so I did Cantor Scholars in 2020, which was an unfortunate time, but a great time to make art. And I did it for spring quarter and summer quarter. So I got stipends for both quarters to respond to an art piece. And at the time, we had a Stephanie Sahuko piece in like the lobby of Cantor, and it was this big flag that said, "I am an American." And that piece responded to her own feelings about being an Asian American and what it means to be American. And so I responded through an embroidered art piece that talked about my own feelings about my relationship with America. And I had another wonderful friend in my Cantor Scholars cohort who had responded by making a cookbook about Filipino food. So it was really cool to be able to sit and think about, you know, what Stephanie Sahuko was talking about and the historic things that she was pulling from, and then compare it to our own lives and respond to it in that way. And I really suggest it. I think that it would be like super fun. You can look into archives if you do something archive related with the Cantor. And it's such a great opportunity to get like kind of behind the scenes. Yeah, if anyone has any questions about that, also happy to answer.
Thank you. Any further questions? I know we have a newcomer too. Welcome. Yeah, and happy to go over things afterwards too with you if you missed the beginning part as well of the workshop. But thank you everybody for coming. Anything in the chat too for our Zoom people? Maybe we'll check there as well. No questions in the chat, no worries. Well, thank you all for having us. This has been such a treat. Huge shout out and thank you to Tyler and Claudia for organizing this, and Robert for doing this crazy cool Zoom virtual hybrid setup, and for all of you for coming. I know it's midterms and crazy time, and so yeah, we're just so excited you're interested in the museums and happy to stick around to answer more questions too, casually. And thank you, Kaylee and Olivia, for being here and interacting with the students. I'll pass it to you in case you want to say any final words.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Like, I can put my email in the chat as well, but I have it. screen. Yes, so feel free to reach out to me anytime. More than happy to chat about the programs. So, yeah. Thank you.